What's happening, everyone? It's Peter Waitzman, founder of Expedition Money here, and I want to hit you up real time because in my area here in the Midwest, we are going through an excessive heat warning, heat advisory, hot times, summer heat wave, whatever you want to call it. And one of the things that's going to happen here is that we are going to be easily over 100 degrees. It's going to be very hot. It's going to be very muggy. The heat index itself is going to be over 110, and it gets dangerous and certainly uncomfortable for most people, even if you are inside your house. I park my car outside a lot, and I've noticed that even on the days leading up to this, the days that were 80, 90 degrees, it was very hot to get in there. Now, for some of you, you might be saying, hey, heat. Listen, I am here in the deserts of Arizona, and it is always hot. Well, I would say, yes, you're absolutely right. I love going to Arizona. It tends to be a dry heat, not that moist heat that it is sometimes around here. But nonetheless, it's going to be very hot, and I wanted to hit you up with some of the ideas that I personally have used here when we have gone into situations where it is very hot to hopefully give you some ideas of how you can keep things a little cooler. Now, some of these are pretty obvious, and it's probably just something that you can do pretty quickly, and I bring them up not because I think people are dumb. You certainly are not. Just when you're in the thick of life and busy with other things, we don't necessarily think about these things, and we don't necessarily work on them because we're just taking care of all the normal stuff. So the first thing, and probably the most obvious thing, is if you have your house or your apartment or whatever, I would close your drapes, your window shades, whatever you have. Some of us have those like Venetian blinds. Some of us have the roll down type. You pull on the cord like you're raising or lowering a flag. Some of you might have curtains, whatever it is. But if you close that up and you actually block out as much light as you possibly can, that is going to reduce that greenhouse effect on your home. It's going to allow whatever cooling method you have in your home to work a little bit better. Now, the other thing I will say here is this isn't really a method to cool off anything, but it's to stay a little cooler, is in my house that I grew up in, we didn't really have a finished basement, but we had a basement with a play area, and it was always cooler. It's always cooler when you get below the surface of the ground. The lower you go in your house, warm air rises, cold air descends, you are going to stay cooler. So if you have a basement or a low point of your house, that might be a good place to sleep, even if you have to throw open that air mattress. Now, if you haven't done radon testing or something like that, or if you have bugs or water seepage, it may not be the best place to camp for the evening, but it can also alleviate the pressures that you are putting on all of your home systems. So closing the drapes, keeping it a little dark, maybe a little romantic. Certainly you can make a movie night, make it a movie day a little earlier while the sun is still out, but that should actually help quite a bit. The other thing I was going to say here is if you have an air conditioning unit, now I have central air conditioning, so we have a condenser outside. It's the big box. You've probably seen these things. They are probably about 3 feet by 3 feet. This metal box outside, it has usually a fan on the top. So when the air conditioner is blowing, it is blowing and exhausting essentially hot air straight up into the air. And what it's doing there is it's actually running through coils the refrigerant. And so it's going through there. There are a bunch of fins that help release some of that heat. The fan is not really exhausting anything. It's just drawing air over those coils to cool them off before it sends it back into your house. Hopefully that is an accurate description for my HVAC people out there. You can certainly correct me, but either way, this is where the cooling happens on the refrigerant in your house. And when that goes back in, it's a little cooler, helps cool off your house, and then it comes back outside. It's basically like a radiator on your car. Now, the issue here is that when it is really hot out, when it is often sunny, a little correlation there, that condenser is hot itself, and it could be very hot and can be very difficult for it to bleed off the extra heat, and it may be sending out hot refrigerant and bringing back in hot refrigerant. So there are a couple things that you can do to help this. Now, believe me, I am just an average homeowner. I am just trying life hacks to life hack my way through life, and there are probably people out there that would say, listen, don't do what I'm about to tell you. People who are professionals who know a lot more than me, which is pretty much anyone. But there are a couple things that you might want to do here. So first of all, this is a unit that usually sits on the side of your house. Sometimes they're shaded. For me, I'm lucky because there's actually a little tree that sits just beyond it. And so at the right time of day, the condenser is shaded. But for many people, it's just outside their house. They don't have trees necessarily up against their house or in that area. Sometimes the condenser is actually in the shade of the house, and then when the sun peaks, it's sitting right in the sun. So one thing you can do is actually shade it. So if you have one of those pop-up party tents, those yard tents, the tailgating tents, the ones that stand on 4 large poles and just have like a sunshade at the top, you could shade your condenser, and that's actually going to help bring that temperature down. It's going to remove it from that direct sunlight, which is probably cooking that thing. So that's probably going to help in and of itself. The other thing I've done, and it reminds me of a couple summers ago, I had some people over and some family in town. So we actually had the house full, which actually makes the house a little warmer anyway. And we were going through one of not only these massive heat waves, but it was in the midst of a dry spell. So the grass was dormant, and man, the AC was just maxed out to keep the house almost unbearable. So it was still high 70s, which isn't super hot, but when you can keep a house at 72, 73, 74, and you can't keep the house any cooler than 79, 80, that just shows how hot it is. One thing I did was not only shade my AC condenser by assisting the tree, putting some other stuff up that would help shade it. Now, just remember here, you don't want to crowd that condenser, right? You don't want to put anything around it because it needs air moving through it very freely. So you don't want to just put something like drape a blanket over it. That would just defeat the whole purpose of it. So make sure that you're not doing something like that. But I was not only shading it, but then I took a sprinkler from my garage that I would just normally use to sprinkle our flower bed or our garden and stuff like that, and just turned it into kind of a very low pressure sprinkler system. So it was only shooting about 7, 8, 9 feet, and it was just watering my condenser. Now, one of the things that I would say here is that there is a bunch of electricals, depending on where it connects to your house. You'll see that there's some conduits, some hoses. There's like a capacitor and some electronics on the backside. You don't want to get anything wet that you can avoid getting wet. Now, I will say, the reason I haven't had a huge problem with this is that we've had some major storms. The Midwest gets very wet, very violent during storms, and all that stuff sits outside anyway. So I feel like my condenser and all those electronics are getting showered by heavy rain and hail and all sorts of stuff anyway. If you're saying, hey, Pete, you never spray household systems with water, well, they're getting sprayed anyway. But in this case, not only did I have it shaded, but I had this kind of low pressure sprinkler also watering the condenser. And really what I was trying to do is get it on the coils. What you can see are these little fins that are stacked on the sides that were away from the house. So I was putting the sprinkler away from the house, spraying into the condenser with very light pressure just to water it. So the sprinkler was just spraying it up and down that front side, just getting it wet. And that endothermic reaction, right? The water, as it's evaporating off, is taking heat away from it as well, just like you would be outside. If you were out in the sun and I sprayed you with water, you'd feel cooler. If you had clothes on, it would feel cooler because that water is being held against your body. And so all I was trying to do is lower the temperature of that condenser to help it work better. And between the shading and the spraying of the water, it was actually working a treat. In fact, I got the house down to a nice icy chilly level and got it reset back up so that the house was nice and comfortable. So that was my hack there, to find a way to make it work more efficiently, to keep myself, my occupants, but mostly myself, and my house cool and bearable in the summer without having to MacGyver something totally crazy, just using the systems that we had, which are curtains, which I don't use very often, and a sprinkler or a hose. You could probably even just have like the sprayer on the end of a hose that you would normally kind of hand spray stuff with. You could probably just lock it in the lock position, keep the pressure pretty low, and just put that on the ground, spraying upwards towards your condenser too. And then also using one of my little tailgate camping social tents that was just sitting in my garage, just pop that open and also shade the condenser that way too. So hopefully maybe you got some ideas here to keep yourself cool, because the summer heat is here. I actually feel like this is almost fall. I don't know when it officially starts, but we are definitely going to go through the next 4 days here of some really hot temps. So regardless of where you are, maybe some of these will help. But if you are usually not expecting this kind of weather, then maybe this will help you get through it, save some money, keep the house cool, maybe lower utility bills, whatever it might be. But just going to wanted to throw out some practical advice, hopefully, that keeps you all safe. So that's it for today. I'll see you later.